A 10-year-old girl was found clutching her 6-month-old sister in a blizzard outside Aspen Ridge, barefoot frozen and moments from death. When a U.S. Marine and his wounded K-9 stumbled upon them, the line between duty and destiny blurred forever. What began as a rescue would unravel a truth buried under snow pain and loyalty. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from and if you believe courage can still save lives. Hit like, share, and subscribe for more true stories of faith and redemption. Snow fell like crushed glass over the Colorado mountains, the kind that glittered beautifully but cut deep when it touched skin. Inside his military transport, Staff Sergeant Jack Carter drove in silence, eyes fixed on the white blur ahead. The radio muttered static, the heater hummed low, and his German Shepherd Hunter watched the snow through the windshield ears twitching. Jack was on a relief patrol, just another long night delivering supplies to the isolated town of Aspen Ridge. But this storm felt different. Too sudden, too heavy, the kind that swallowed headlights and made the world small. A faint beep broke through the static. Jack frowned. The radio was locked to standard emergency frequencies, but the tone was wrong, sharper, older. He adjusted the dial. Another beep followed by 3 letters drawn through static S-O-S. Jack froze. That frequency was from a decommissioned SAR Search and Rescue Channel 1 that hadn't been active for years. He replayed it. The signal repeated weaker but steady, followed by blurred coordinates. His stomach tightened. "That's impossible," he whispered. Hunter lifted his head, nose pressed to the glass, ears raised. The dog felt it too, the weight in the air that wasn't just the storm. Jack glanced at the GPS. A red dot blinked on the edge of the map deep inside the snowfields. A dead frequency phantom coordinates and a blizzard that could bury a man alive. He hesitated only a second. "All right, boy," he muttered, turning the wheel. "Let's see who's calling." The road narrowed to a single icy track. Trees bowed under snow, their branches like black veins in the white. The radio kept whispering broken voices, the faint sound of metal against metal like something alive under the static. Jack's breath fogged the window. He wasn't superstitious, but something about that sound crawled beneath the skin. Half an hour later, the headlights caught a shape in the distance, a weather station, old and forgotten, standing crooked against the storm. Its metal siding rattled. A single bulb flickered weakly above the door. Jack parked a few yards away and cut the engine. Silence rushed in so complete he could hear his own pulse. "Stay close," he told Hunter. The dog stepped into the snow first pause, sinking soundlessly. The wind howled through the tower's broken vents, carrying faint metallic echoes. Jack pushed the door. It swung open with a groan. Inside, the air smelled of rust and cold metal. Instruments lined the wall, all dead. Coffee mugs still sat on a counter, half filled with frozen sludge. Whoever had worked here had left in a hurry. Then he saw them tracks in the snow near the doorway. Tiny ovals barely an inch deep. They weren't made by boots. They were too small, too close together. Children's footprints. Jack crouched, brushing the frost away. The prints led from the door to the outer deck, then disappeared into the storm. He looked at Hunter. The dog was staring in the same direction, nose twitching, tail still. "You smell something?" Jack asked quietly. Hunter barked once, low and certain. Following the trail, Jack rounded the corner of the weather station. The beam of his flashlight swept across the snow, glinting off something caught on a nail. A child's scarf, red once, now faded to brown and stiff with ice. It fluttered weakly in the wind like a small flag. Jack took it gently, his gloved fingers trembling just enough for him to notice. The footprints continued down the hill, half erased by the wind. He scanned the area again, 2 sets unevenly spaced. One light and steady, the other dragged slightly. The image built itself in his mind, a child carrying another, stumbling through the storm. His throat tightened. He lifted the radio. Command. This is Marine Unit Delta 7. I've got possible civilians, 2 miners moving northeast of Ridge Pass. Signal origin traces to a defunct SAR frequency. Requesting confirmation. Static. No reply. The storm was killing all transmission. He tried again, louder. Still nothing. Hunter barked once, sharp. Jack turned. Far off through the sheets of snow, a faint flicker moved, maybe a reflection, maybe a light. It vanished as quickly as it appeared. The temperature was dropping fast. Frost was biting through his jacket. He looked at the scarf again, then at the white nothing ahead. He could turn back, mark the location, and wait for backup. But he knew what backup meant in weather like this, hours, maybe a day. A baby wouldn't last that long. He shoved the scarf into his pocket, clipped Hunter's lead, and started forward. The snow rose to his knees, but he kept walking. The wind screamed around him, carrying a sound that might have been a cry or just the mountain talking to itself. Either way, it made him move faster. Somewhere beyond the ridge, someone had sent that signal. Someone small. Someone still alive. Jack's flashlight trembled slightly in his gloved hand as the beam found new prints ahead, leading deeper into the storm. Hunter pressed close beside him, fur crusted with ice. "Stay with me, boy," Jack murmured. The dog answered with a low rumble steady as a heartbeat. They moved through the snow like 2 shadows chasing ghosts. Behind them, the weather station light flickered once more and went dark. Ahead, the mountains stretched into a white void that seemed to swallow even sound. Jack glanced down at the prints again. The smaller ones had stopped appearing. Only the larger ones continued heavier, slower, desperate. He gritted his teeth. "Hold on, kid," he whispered into the storm. "Just hold on." And then he saw it barely visible through the snow curtain, a faint glow ahead, warm and trembling like a lantern half buried in ice. He exhaled, his breath clouding in front of him. "We found you," he murmured, though he didn't yet know who you was. Hunter barked softly, tail lifting once. Jack tightened his grip on the flashlight and moved toward the light, not knowing that this single step would pull him and the entire town of Aspen Ridge into a night none of them would ever forget. The wind had turned cruel, cutting through layers of fabric like invisible glass. Jack Carter followed the trail of small footprints down the ridge until the beam of his flashlight met a broken fence line buried in snow. Beyond it stood the outline of an old train depot, its roof sagging under the weight of white silence. The signal that had led him here was gone now, swallowed by static, but the prints had not lied. They curved toward the building and disappeared beneath a half-open door that creaked in protest with each gust. Jack pushed through the smell of frozen wood and rusted metal filling his lungs. The interior was a graveyard of benches and broken lights. Then his flashlight caught something on the far end of the room, a shape too still to be asleep. He approached carefully, breath misting in front of him. A small girl, maybe 10, sat hunched on a wooden bench, a baby wrapped in a torn blanket cradled tightly against her chest. Her lips were blue, her eyelashes dusted with frost, and the child in her arms barely stirred. For a moment, Jack didn't move. He only heard the storm outside and the faint rattle of the bulb above. Then training gave way to instinct. He pulled off his gloves, checked for a pulse at the girl's neck, weak but steady. The baby's heartbeat fluttered like a bird under ice. "Hey," he whispered, lowering his voice to something soft, something human. "You're okay now." Hunter pressed close, nose brushing the child's knee, his breath forming a thin fog that warmed her torn leggings. The girl stirred, whispering something he barely caught. "Don't take her." Her voice was so faint it seemed to break apart in the air. Jack shook his head. "I'm not taking her. I'm helping you." He shrugged off his heavy coat and wrapped it around both children, tucking the edges beneath them to trap whatever heat remained. He reached for his radio. "Command, this is Delta 7. I've got 2 miners found at Aspen Ridge Depot, both hypothermic, requesting immediate medevac." Static. The storm had smothered every signal. He tried twice more. Nothing. Hunter whined ears, pinned tail low. Jack looked at the window. The snow outside had thickened to a wall. The world beyond the glass no longer existed. He lifted his gaze back to the girl who blinked slowly, eyes glassy but aware. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked. "Emily," she murmured. "And this Grace." The name came out on a breath like a prayer. Jack swallowed hard. "Okay, Emily. We're going to get you and your sister somewhere warm, all right?" Her small head nodded once before falling back to his shoulder. He scooped them up, one arm under the girl, the other securing the baby against his chest. They were feather-light, terrifyingly so. Hunter barked once, low but sharp outside. The wind had shifted pitch, a sign the storm was turning angry. Jack stepped into the gale, his breath stolen instantly. The cold hit like a physical blow, but there was no time to think. The depot's light vanished behind him, replaced by the endless white. He pushed through each step, sinking deep, the baby pressed to his chest, Emily's hair frozen against his collar. Hunter took point his silhouette, the only moving mark against the blizzard ears tracking sound only he could hear. Jack angled toward the truck, its faint hazard lights blinking like a heartbeat in the distance. When he reached it, the relief was short-lived. The engine refused to turn. He tried once, twice, 3 times, nothing but a slow whine. The temperature gauge read below 0. The storm howled louder, mocking. "Come on," he muttered, gripping the wheel until his knuckles ached. Hunter barked, pawing the snow beside the headlights. Jack exhaled, made a decision. He tore open the glove compartment, grabbed the emergency blanket, water flask, and flare. The hospital was 8 miles east, an eternity in weather like this, but staying meant death. He slung the baby tighter across his chest, adjusted the blanket around Emily, and looked down at Hunter. "You lead," he said. The dog didn't wait for another command. They stepped into the white abyss. Every few minutes, Jack checked the baby's breath, counting seconds between faint puffs of air. His muscles burned from the weight and cold, but he didn't stop. The world narrowed to the crunch of boots, the rasp of wind, and Hunter's dark shape weaving through the storm. Time lost meaning. Distance became measured only in survival. When the wind shifted again, carrying a brief clearing, Jack saw a ridge ahead with the faint glow of highway reflectors. Civilization close enough to feel real. He pressed on, legs trembling, voice hoarse from whispering the same words over and over like a mantra. "Just a little further. You're safe. I've got you." Hunter slowed at a bend where the snow had piled into a waist-high drift. The dog climbed, first paused, digging through ice, then looked back, eyes catching the faint beam of the flashlight as if saying, "Follow me." Jack hoisted himself up, clutching both children close, sliding down the other side into softer snow. The wind lessened, replaced by a sound almost gentle. The hum of power lines overhead. He could smell smoke faintly, a sign of houses ahead. The baby stirred, then a small whimper breaking through the storm's silence. Jack stopped, chest heaving, his throat tightening with relief. "That's it," he whispered. "You keep fighting, little one." Hunter barked softly, circling them once before facing forward again. The Marine adjusted his grip, his boots sinking deep into the fresh powder as he took another step and another, each one a promise he didn't say out loud. By the time the first lights of the town glimmered faintly through the storm, Jack could no longer feel his hands, but the heat of the baby's fragile heartbeat against his chest was enough to guide him on. The snowstorm had thinned just enough for the moon to bleed through the clouds, painting the landscape in shades of silver and gray. Jack Carter trudged forward. Emily pressed close to his chest beneath the thick layers of his jacket. Her sister Grace bundled in the thermal blanket against his heartbeat. Hunter moved ahead, nose low, his fur dusted with frost, each exhale forming little ghosts that vanished instantly in the cold. Jack's legs ached, his breathing rough, but he refused to stop. The faint light from his flashlight cut through the snow like a thread guiding them through a white labyrinth. In the distance, half buried by snowdrifts, something rose against the hillside. A ranger cabin, small and forgotten, its outline barely visible beneath the weight of ice. Relief pulsed faintly through Jack's chest. Shelter, heat, maybe a working radio. "Almost there, hang on," he whispered, not sure if the words were for Emily or himself. When they reached the door, Hunter sniffed around the porch, tail low, ears rotating like radar. The steps were half covered in frozen debris and the door handle was stiff with ice. Jack shifted Emily slightly, set her down beside the doorway, and tried to push the handle. It didn't budge. He pressed his shoulder against it. Nothing. "It's blocked," he muttered. Hunter barked once, deep and short, as if confirming the obvious. Jack grabbed the snow shovel leaning against the porch railing and jammed it under the crack, forcing the door an inch open before it stopped against something heavy from the inside. He could see the edge of a wooden table pressed across the entry nails, hammered crudely to hold it in place. Whoever had been here hadn't wanted company. He circled to the window, brushed away the frost, and peered through. The inside was dark except for the pale reflection of his flashlight. The cabin was small, one room a cot, a stove, shelves lined with canned food now rimed with frost. Everything looked abandoned but in a hurry. The floor was scattered with broken glass and a spilled lantern. The stove door hung open ash cold. Jack hesitated, scanning for movement, then swung the shovel through the glass. The window shattered with a flat crack swallowed instantly by the wind. He hoisted himself through landing softly on the other side. The air inside was stale heavy with the smell of burnt oil and something faintly metallic fear preserved by the cold. He unlatched the door and let Hunter in first. The dog padded forward cautiously, sniffing corners, tail stiff. Emily stood at the threshold, trembling but alert. "It's okay," Jack said, gently pulling her inside. He set her near the cot, placed Grace beside her, then moved to check the generator in the corner. The fuel gauge was empty, and a wrench lay nearby, half buried in snow blown through a broken vent. The radio set beside it was dead, its antenna bent wires cut clean through. Someone hadn't wanted a signal to leave this place. Jack's jaw tightened. He moved to the table that had been used as a barricade. Papers and food wrappers covered the surface, among them an open notebook, its pages stiff with cold. Most of the writing was faded pencil marks, dates, supply notes, but one line near the end stopped him. It was written in uneven letters, the kind born from shaking hands. "He's back. Took the kids. Don't open the door." Jack stared at it for a long moment, the words sinking in like slow ice. The wind groaned against the walls, and for the first time that night, he felt something colder than the storm itself intent. This wasn't a random accident, not a simple case of lost children. Someone had been here before, someone dangerous. He turned toward Emily. "Emily," he said carefully, crouching beside her. "Did you and Grace come from a cabin near here?" Her eyes darted toward the floor. She didn't answer. "Was there a man?" He pressed softly. She hesitated, then nodded once, eyes welling. "He was angry," she whispered. "He said, Mommy wasn't coming back." Her words trembled, the truth breaking out one fragment at a time. Jack felt his stomach knot. "All right," he said quietly. "You don't have to talk about him now. You're safe." Hunter growled low near the window. Jack turned instantly, flashlight sweeping the glass. Outside, nothing but snow, moving endless snow. But Hunter's instincts never lied. He walked to the window, peered into the night, and thought he saw, just for a second, a shadow moving between trees. It vanished before the light caught it. His pulse quickened. "We're not staying long," he muttered. He checked the cabinet beside the stove, finding a few candles, matches, and a nearly empty thermos. He lit one candle and set it on the table beside the notebook. The flame trembled, throwing small golden circles across the room, illuminating the scrawled words again. "He's back. Took the kids." Jack looked down at the baby sleeping against Emily's chest and understood too well what those words might mean. He pulled his jacket tighter, checking the pistol holstered at his side, not out of paranoia, but necessity. The cabin creaked as the wind shifted. A loose shutter clapped like a heartbeat. Hunter moved closer to the door, muscles taut nose to the crack at the floor. Jack gathered the girls, wrapping another blanket around them. "We'll rest here for an hour," he said, voice low. "Then we move." He wanted to believe the figure outside had been a trick of the storm, but the unease in his chest said otherwise. Somewhere beyond those trees, another story was unfolding, a story that had started before the snow, before the signal. The pieces were coming together, and for the first time Jack wasn't sure if the storm was hiding them from something or hiding something from them. He turned off the flashlight, leaving only the candlelight flickering against the window. The small flame bent sideways as if bowing to an unseen breath from outside. Hunter growled again, quiet but certain. Jack reached over, snuffed the flame with his glove, and whispered, "Stay sharp, boy." The room plunged into darkness, and the sound of the wind filled every space between heartbeats. The radio crackled like a dying heartbeat. Jack Carter tightened his jaw as he caught fragments through the static Miller Bridge. Collapse. Route closed. Then silence. He stared at the small green light on the radio until it blinked out, swallowed by snow. The bridge was their only way across the valley. Without it, the hospital was unreachable, and the baby wouldn't survive another hour in this cold. He looked at Grace wrapped tightly in his jacket, her tiny breaths fading to mist, and at Emily, pale and trembling, but still trying to smile. "We'll find a way," he said, more to himself than to her. Outside, the storm howled like an angry thing reborn. Hunter stood by the door, his coat-flecked white eyes fixed on the path ahead. The dog didn't need words to know they were running out of time. Jack loaded the few supplies, half a canteen of melted snow, a flare, the first aid kit, and guided them toward the truck. The engine coughed but came alive on the third try, and the headlights sliced through walls of falling snow. The tires crunched over ice, the chains biting rhythmically. For a while they moved through a tunnel of white silence, broken only by the wind and the faint, uneven pulse of the baby in Jack's arms. Emily leaned forward from the back seat, her voice barely audible. "Is it far?" "Not far," he answered. It was a lie, but he made himself believe it for her sake. The storm had stripped the world of color. Even the trees stood like ghosts. Hunter's ears twitched every few seconds, tracking sounds buried deep in the wind. Cracking branches, shifting snow, the whisper of unseen movement. When the first shadow of the bridge emerged through the haze, Jack exhaled slowly. Miller Bridge stretched before them, a thin steel skeleton glazed in ice, stretching across the black mouth of the gorge. A fallen warning sign lay half-buried, unsafe, closed to all vehicles. Jack stared at it, then at the girls. "Hold on," he said. He eased the truck forward, the tires vibrating across the frozen metal grid. The bridge groaned under their weight, the sound echoing like a moan beneath their feet. Halfway across, Hunter lifted his head. His body stiffened, muscles locked. Then came the growl, a deep guttural sound that rose from his chest like thunder. "What is it, boy?" Jack whispered. Hunter barked once, sharp and urgent. Jack's instincts screamed before thought caught up. He slammed the brakes. The truck shuddered to a stop. For a single heartbeat, there was only the whistle of wind through steel. Then the bridge gave way. A section ahead snapped free with a sound like a gunshot, the center span collapsing into the ravine. A wave of snow and shattered ice surged upward, shaking the truck violently. Emily screamed. Jack's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. Hunter's claws scraped the seat, bracing himself. 2 more feet forward, and they would have vanished into the gorge. Jack reversed slowly, each creak of metal sounding like a countdown. When they reached solid ground, he stopped, chest heaving. The silence that followed felt heavier than the storm. He opened the door, stepping into the biting air. Snow stung his face as he stared at the void where the bridge had been. The river below was frozen, winding like a white scar through the canyon. It led east toward the town. "We can't go around," he muttered. "We go down." Emily's voice shook. "Down there it'll hold," he said, though he wasn't sure. He packed what little they had into his coat, tightened Grace's blanket, and took Emily's hand. Hunter leapt from the truck, first landing softly in the snow. Together they climbed down the slope, each step carving deep into the drift. The descent was brutal. Twice Jack slipped, catching himself, before falling on the child in his arms. When they reached the riverbed, the world felt quieter, the wind trapped by the walls of ice and stone. Jack tested the surface with his boot. It groaned but didn't crack. "Stay behind me," he said. They moved along the frozen stream, following its curve. Each step left a fleeting mark erased seconds later by falling snow. Hunter trotted ahead, nose low, tail steady. The cold bit through Jack's gloves until his fingers went numb, but he didn't stop. He could feel Grace's pulse flutter weakly against his chest, small, erratic, stubborn. Hunter paused, lifting his paw. Blood streaked the ice. Jack knelt, tearing a strip from his sleeve to wrap it. "Good boy," he whispered. "We're almost there." The dog blinked once, then pushed on, limping but unwavering. The snow grew thicker. The flashlight beam bounced uselessly off the white. The storm muffled everything, their steps, their breathing, even the hum of fear that lived between heartbeats. Then, faintly through the wind, Jack saw light, a flicker of orange far ahead, soft and unreal. "Emily," he said, pointing. "You see that?" She nodded weakly, clutching his arm. "That's where we're going." Hunter barked once, tail lifting a spark of strength reborn. They pressed forward, following that fragile glow through the snow. Jack didn't know if it was a porch light, a fire, or simply the reflection of hope itself, but it was enough to keep them moving. The hospital lights burned too bright after the storm. The snow outside still clung to the windows, soft and ghostly, but inside Aspen Ridge Medical Center, everything felt too clean, too sterile, too late. Jack Carter stood just inside the emergency bay, soaked to the bone, holding baby Rosie in his arms, while Emily clung to his coat. Hunter lay beside the gurney, his fur wet and matted eyes tracking every movement. Nurses shouted codes, hands flying, the metallic smell of antiseptic mixing with the steam from Jack's breath. A doctor tried to take Rosie from him, but his grip tightened. "She's still warm," he said hoarsely. "Give her a chance." The doctor nodded to the nurse, then gently pried the infant from his arms and laid her beneath the heating lamp. The monitors hummed. A green line flickered, then flattened. The sound that followed was the one Jack feared most, the long, unbroken tone of silence. "No pulse," someone said. "Starting CPR." Time blurred. Voices layered over each other like static. Emily's sobs came soft and high, a sound that pierced deeper than the storm had. Jack felt his legs weaken. He had carried her through hell, through ice and fear, only to lose her under fluorescent light. His vision tunneled. He saw the battlefield again, the med tent in Fallujah, the frozen ground of Norway, the memory of a boy he once tried and failed to save. He stepped forward before anyone could stop him. "Move," he said, voice low but firm. The nurse hesitated. "Sir, you can't." "I said move." There was something in his tone that made her step back. Jack stripped off his gloves and lifted Rosie gently from the table. She was impossibly light, her skin cold as marble. He pulled her against his bare chest, pressing her ear over his heartbeat, wrapping his arms around her tiny frame. "Come on, sweetheart," he whispered, rocking her gently. You made it this far. Don't stop now. He rubbed her back slow at first, then harder, his breath fogging against her hair. He knew the principle, body heat transfer, controlled compression rewarming through contact. It was a battlefield technique, crude but human. The monitors stayed flat. Nurses exchanged glances. Her core temps dropping. Let him try, said a soft voice. Nurse Ava Quinn, the night shift charge nurse, stood by the monitors. Her eyes, gray-green and tired, caught the faint tremor in Jack's hands. 5 more minutes, she said quietly. Jack didn't answer. He just kept whispering to the baby. You're a fighter. You don't quit. Not tonight. He remembered the way Hunter had refused to stop, the way Emily had trudged through snow without crying, and he poured that same defiance into every breath. A minute passed, then 2. The monitor twitched. A blip. Another. The line stuttered, then rose into a slow, fragile rhythm. Ava's breath caught. We have a pulse, she whispered. The room froze. The air itself seemed to bow in relief. Emily gasped and covered her mouth. Jack felt a sob break free, raw and soundless, as he cradled the baby tighter. Rosie's skin had turned from gray to pink, faint but real. She gave a weak, squeaky cry, small, miraculous, alive. That's it, Jack murmured. That's my girl. Hunter barked once from the corner, a sound of pure release, his tail sweeping the tiles. The doctors swarmed again, moving Rosie to an incubator. Ava guided Jack back, her hand steady on his arm. You did what no machine could, she said softly. Jack shook his head. She did it. I just held on. For the first time since the bridge collapsed, he let himself breathe. But peace never lasts long in a storm's shadow. A few hours later, as dawn crept across the frosted hills, Ava sat at her station reviewing intake records. The girls had no IDs, no tags, no digital footprint. She logged into the missing persons database, typing the details. Female, approximately 10 years and 6 months, found during snowstorm near Miller Bridge. 2 names appeared, Leah and Rosie Henderson, reported missing 2 weeks earlier. Guardian of record, Travis Henderson, not Evelyn Henderson, the biological mother whose case file showed no custody rights. Ava frowned. The match was exact, same ages, same birthmarks. She checked the police notes. Domestic custody dispute unresolved. Her eyes drifted to the man sitting outside the trauma bay. Jack Carter, former Marine sergeant. No family on file, bloodshot eyes fixed on the room where the girls slept. To the system, he didn't look like a rescuer. He looked like a man with 2 children who weren't his. An administrator entered the nurse's station, clipboard in hand. You saw the alert, he asked. State investigators been notified. They want a statement. Ava hesitated. He saved them. And until it's sorted, the administrator said gently, he's also a suspect. Outside, the sun bled pale gold over the snow. Jack sat motionless, unaware of the growing tension. Emily was asleep on his shoulder, Rosie breathing softly inside the incubator, visible through the glass. Hunter lay at his feet, head resting on his paws, calm but watchful. The warmth of survival had barely settled when the cold of suspicion began to creep back in. A uniformed deputy approached from the hallway. Mr. Carter. Jack looked up. I need to ask you some questions about the children, the deputy said, voice polite but clipped. Jack straightened, fatigue sharpening into alertness. Their mother will be looking for them, he said. She'll come. The deputy nodded, expression unreadable. We'll verify that. For now, I'll need you to stay here. Hunter lifted his head, a low growl humming in his chest. Ava watched from the station, torn between duty and conscience. She saw the way Jack's hand stayed near Emily's hair, protective even in uncertainty. The way he didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. He just waited silent as the snow still falling outside. Somewhere down the hall, a phone rang, perhaps the first ripple of the truth on its way. The snow had slowed to a soft whisper by midnight. Aspen Ridge Hospital slept beneath a blanket of white that shimmered under the parking lights, the kind of stillness that only comes after a storm that took too much. Inside, the corridors glowed with the dim, steady hum of fluorescent lamps. Jack sat slumped in a chair outside the pediatric recovery wing, his eyes fixed on the glass window where Rosie slept beneath a web of wires and monitors. Emily was curled beside him, her head resting against his arm, breathing evenly for the first time in days. Hunter lay by their feet, one paw bandaged chest rising and falling with quiet rhythm. The chaos had ended, but unease lingered in the sterile air. Down the hall, 2 deputies stood by the nurses' station, talking in low voices. Jack could feel their glances, could hear the rustle of forms being filled, forms that might decide whether he walked out of this building as a hero or in handcuffs. Nurse Ava approached him quietly with a paper cup of coffee. "They're both stable," she said softly. "Core temperature normalizing. You bought them time." Jack nodded, but didn't speak. His voice had been spent hours ago in the desperate whispers that brought Rosie back. Ava studied him for a moment, then added, "There's a woman who called earlier. Said she was driving from the south. Wouldn't give her name, just said she was looking for 2 girls who matched that description." Jack looked up. Their mother, Ava, hesitated. She didn't say, but she sounded determined. Outside, a lone figure stumbled through the snow toward the hospital entrance. Evelyn Price's boots sank deep into the drifts, her coat torn and stiff with frost. She had walked for miles, guided by the faint glow of streetlights, and the single rumor she'd clung to that 2 little girls had been found alive near Miller Bridge. Her lungs burned every breath, cutting through her chest, but she didn't stop. When she reached the front doors, the security guard startled, rushing forward. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Evelyn tried to speak, but her voice came out as a rasp. "My daughters," she gasped. "Leia and Rosie." The guard exchanged a quick look with the nurse at reception, who immediately called for Ava. Within seconds, Ava appeared, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. "You're the one who called." Evelyn nodded, clutching the edge of the counter for support. "Are they here? Please tell me they're here." Ava hesitated. "Ma'am, the names on file are Leia and Rosie Hart. Do you have identification?" Evelyn fumbled through her coat, pulling out a worn wallet and a folded birth certificate. "Price." Ava read quietly. "Not Hart." Evelyn's eyes filled. "Their father changed it when he took them. He said I'd never find them again." Her hands trembled as she slid the papers across the counter. "Please, I just need to see them." The administrator arrived, cautious but kind. "We have to confirm custody first, Mrs. Price." "You understand, miss," she corrected weakly. "Just Miss Price." He nodded. "Then please wait here while we verify." Evelyn sank onto the bench, exhaustion pulling at her bones. Her vision blurred as the warmth of the hospital wrapped around her, too bright, too clean. For the first time in days, she felt close enough to hope that it terrified her. Upstairs, Leia stirred. The sedative had faded to a light fog. The steady beep of the monitor matched her heartbeat, steady but fragile. She dreamt of her mother's voice, the lullaby that once filled their small cabin before the shouting began. In her sleep, she murmured fragments of it, the melody soft and broken. Downstairs, Ava returned to the waiting area where Evelyn sat. "They're upstairs in recovery," she said gently. "But visitation is restricted for now. The children are under protective care until the situation is verified." Evelyn stood. "I just need to see them. I won't touch them, I promise." Ava hesitated, then nodded. "Follow me, but quietly." They moved through the dim corridor, their footsteps muffled by the hum of heating vents. When they reached the pediatric room, Evelyn stopped at the glass wall. Inside, Rosie lay in the incubator, tiny hands curled near her face. Leia was asleep in the bed beside her face, pale but peaceful. Evelyn pressed a trembling hand to the window. "That's them," she whispered. Ava glanced at her uncertain. "We'll need proof." Evelyn swallowed hard. "Proof." She closed her eyes, whispering, "She won't need to see me. She'll hear me." Evelyn began to hum low and unsteady at first, then stronger the old lullaby she had sung every night since Leia's birth. "Somewhere over the mountain, blue Mama's waiting home for you." The notes floated through the narrow gap under the door, drifting like mist into the room. Inside, Leia shifted. Her fingers twitched. The monitor beeped faster. Her lips parted, and a faint voice echoed the same tune off-key, but unmistakable. "Mama's waiting home for you." The sound silenced the nurses. Ava's breath caught. Jack, sitting nearby, lifted his head slowly, disbelief and recognition washing across his face. Through the glass, he saw Evelyn's shoulders trembling, her lips still moving with the song. Leia murmured again, louder this time. Mommy Ava opened the door quietly. Evelyn stepped inside, tears streaming down her face. She didn't touch the bed, didn't move closer, only kept singing until Leia's eyes fluttered open. The little girl blinked once, then smiled through the fog of confusion. "You came back." Evelyn nodded, her voice breaking. "I never stopped trying." Hunter whined softly from his spot near the wall, tail brushing the floor like a heartbeat in rhythm with the song. Ava wiped her eyes, unable to hide her smile. For the first time that week, the hospital felt warm. No signature, no document, no courtroom could say what that melody had already proved. The bond between mother and child was not something that could be rewritten. Outside, the first hint of dawn crept over the mountains, staining the snow in faint gold. The storm had passed, and for the first time since it began, hope had a voice. Morning crept slowly over Aspen Ridge, the snow outside gleaming like crushed glass beneath the pale sun. Inside the hospital cafeteria, the smell of coffee lingered faintly, though no one spoke above a whisper. The story of the Marine and the lost girls had already spread through town, half miracle, half mystery. Jack Carter sat alone at the far corner, uniform jacket folded neatly beside him, eyes tracing the steam rising from his untouched cup. Hunter rested beneath the table, his head on Jack's boots, ever watchful. It should have been a morning of peace. Rosie was stable. Evelyn hadn't left her side. Leia slept with her small hand tangled in her mother's hair, but the peace felt brittle, like something waiting to be shattered. The first crack came when Deputy Harris approached hat in hand, voice heavy with something practiced. "Mr. Carter," he said carefully, "we found something up near the weather station. Thought you might want to explain it before others start talking." He placed a sealed evidence bag on the table. Inside was a small metal canteen, green scratched, stamped with faded black letters, U.S. Marine Corps. Property. Jack's brow furrowed. "There are millions like that," he said quietly. "Not with your name etched under the cap," Harris replied. Jack took the canteen, his stomach tightening. Sure enough, faint but unmistakable, Carter, J.T. The metal was cold in his hand. He set it down carefully. "That's from my first deployment. It went missing years ago." Harris nodded but didn't sit. "It was found near the same ridge where the kids were discovered, alongside tire tracks matching a military Humvee. You understand how that looks." Jack looked up, meeting the deputy's eyes. "I didn't kidnap those girls. I saved them." Harris sighed. "I believe you, but the state investigators might not. They're on their way." Jack exhaled slowly, trying to steady the storm that began building in his chest. He remembered the bridge collapsing, the cold, the endless walk. There hadn't been time for anything but survival. Who else knew about the girls, he asked. Harris hesitated. Their father filed the missing report. Travis Morrow. The name struck like a pulse of ice down Jack's spine. He knew that name too well. Same platoon, same dust and fire, different choices. Years ago, Morrow had been court-martialed for misconduct, violence, theft of federal property. He had vanished after discharge. His record sealed his temper legend. Jack had testified against him once, and that testimony had ended Morrow's career. Now the name returned like a shadow crossing fresh snow. "You're telling me their father's Travis Morrow?" Jack said. Harris nodded. "Lives off-grid east of the pass." The mother never pressed charges, but there were reports. Jack looked toward the window, the reflection of his own face staring back, tired-lined, questioning. He rose from the table, Hunter following instantly. "Where is he now?" "Don't," Harris warned. "Let the investigators handle it." But Jack's voice was low and steady. "He's setting me up. That canteen wasn't lost, it was planted." He remembered Morrow's obsession with revenge, the threats whispered years ago in the barracks. "One day, Carter, you'll know what it's like to lose everything you protect." Jack left the cafeteria before Harris could stop him. Outside, the snow had hardened into a brittle crust, crunching under his boots as he crossed to the parking lot. He needed airspace silence to think. Hunter trotted beside him, limping slightly but alert. The dog's ears twitched, nose lifting toward the wind. Jack crouched, resting a hand on his fur. "You smell it too, don't you?" There was something faint, the chemical tang of diesel, the burnt oil scent of an old generator. It was coming from the tree line beyond the maintenance sheds. He moved closer, careful instinct guiding him as it always had in patrols where silence meant survival. Behind the shed, half buried in snow, he found the track's deep tire marks, military pattern leading back toward the old ranger roads. He followed them for 50 yards, until he saw it, a torn patch of camouflage cloth caught on a fence. He reached for it, heart pounding, and turned it over. Stenciled faintly along the inside was a name, Morrow T. Jack straightened, snow stinging his eyes. The pieces fell together, the planted evidence, the timing, the sudden reappearance of the girls. Morrow wasn't gone. He was close enough to manipulate every move. And worse, he'd used the chaos of the storm to bait the trap. He returned to the hospital boots, wet face hard. Ava spotted him in the hall. "Jack, they're asking for you. Investigators from the base." "I know," he said quietly. "Tell them I'll talk. But first I need a favor." Ava frowned. "What kind of favor?" "Check the security cameras near the east entrance. If anyone accessed the maintenance wing between midnight and dawn, I need to know." Ava hesitated, then nodded. "You think someone's framing you?" "I think someone already did." In the observation room, he watched through the glass as Evelyn soothed Rosie. The woman's exhaustion had turned into fierce calm, the kind only a mother who had already lost everything could carry. Jack felt the old conflict rising, duty versus conscience. If he spoke the truth about Morrow, it would reopen classified reports, drag his unit through an investigation, and possibly destroy what was left of his career. But if he stayed silent, the real threat would remain out there watching, waiting for another opening. Hunter nudged his leg eyes, meeting his with quiet understanding. Jack exhaled, the decision crystallizing inside him like ice. He turned to Ava. "If they ask, tell them everything I did. But I need 24 hours before I turn myself in." She frowned. "Jack, please." The word carried weight, not desperation. Ava saw something in his face. Not guilt, but purpose. She nodded once. 24 hours. As he walked down the hallway, snowlight flickered through the windows. Somewhere beyond those mountains, a ghost in marine green was moving. The line between brotherhood and betrayal had never felt thinner. Jack adjusted his jacket, eyes narrowing toward the horizon. "It ends tonight," he murmured. Hunter barked softly as if agreeing. The night had turned brittle and silent, the kind of cold that eats sound. The mountains surrounding Aspen Ridge gleamed under a thin blue moonlight. Jack Carter moved through the snow with practiced precision, his breath clouding in the air, his rifle strapped against his shoulder. Hunter trotted beside him, his bandaged paw leaving dark dots of blood that froze almost instantly. Behind them, the hospital lights were long gone, replaced by the endless wilderness of the Rockies. Jack knew he shouldn't have come alone, but waiting for bureaucracy would mean giving Morrow another day to disappear, or worse, another day to strike first. He crouched at the edge of the old Ranger Road, scanning the valley below. The radio in his pocket crackled faintly. Ava's voice, urgent but distant. "Jack, please turn back. The MPs are on their way. They said to hold your position." He pressed the button briefly. "Tell them they'll find me when this is over." Then he switched it off. Some decisions didn't wait for orders. Hunter lifted his head, suddenly ears pricking toward the east ridge. A low growl rumbled through his chest. "You got something?" Jack whispered. The dog barked once sharp and certain, then broke into a run weaving through the snow-covered pines. Jack followed his boots, sinking deep, lungs burning from the cold air. They climbed a small rise and stopped near the frozen creek that twisted through the valley. Hunter pawed at a patch of snow nose, digging furiously. Jack dropped to his knees beside him, brushing away layers of frost until something metallic clinked beneath his glove. A canvas strap. He pulled harder and unearthed a military duffel, olive green, old the zipper stiff with rust. The initials on the side were faint but clear. Morrow T. Jack opened it slowly. Inside lay a pair of small gloves, pink wool, child-sized, and a half-empty MRE pack. Beneath them was a folded map marked with crude red circles and a handwritten note. "Wire transfer by 0200 or both disappear again." His stomach turned cold. It wasn't just revenge, it was extortion. Morrow had planned to ransom his own children. The evidence was everything the investigators would need, but it was also bait left too perfectly placed. Jack scanned the tree-line instincts, screaming. "Hunter, back." The gunshot cracked through the stillness, splitting the night. Snow exploded near Jack's shoulder. He spun, ducking behind a boulder. Hunter yelped a sound that cut deeper than the bullet's echo. Jack's heart seized. Hunter. He crawled toward the sound, spotting the dog sprawled in the snow chest, heaving blood blooming against the white. A second shot rang out, grazing the rock above his head. The voice that followed was one he hadn't heard in years, but would never forget. "Always the hero, huh?" Carter. Travis Morrow stepped from the shadows, the rifle glinting in his hands. His face was gaunt, eyes hollow, the Marine insignia on his old jacket blackened with age. "You took everything from me," he hissed. "My rank, my brothers, my family. Now I take it back." Jack rose slowly, keeping his hands visible. "You did that to yourself, Travis. You hurt them. You hurt your own kids." Morrow's mouth twisted. "You think you know what it's like to lose?" He aimed the rifle at Jack's chest. "I'll show you." Before he could fire, Hunter moved. Despite the wound, the German Shepherd lunged forward with a snarl that shook the air. The impact threw Morrow off balance, the gun skidding into the snow. The two rolled, man and dog, a tangle of fury and survival. Morrow shouted, striking Hunter with his forearm, but the dog's teeth found his shoulder holding with desperate strength. Jack sprinted forward, tackling Morrow to the ground. The fight was raw and fast, two soldiers from the same war now locked in a smaller one. Jack pinned Morrow's wrist, forcing the rifle away, but Morrow's other hand caught his throat. The pressure tightened until Jack's vision blurred. Then Hunter, bleeding and trembling, dragged himself up and bit down again, this time locking onto Morrow's arm. Snow flew. The three of them crashed against the frozen creek, the ice groaning under their weight. Jack broke free, grabbed the rifle, and trained it on Morrow's chest, heaving. "It's over," he said. Morrow laughed, cold and broken. "Not for me." He lunged again, but the sound that followed wasn't a gunshot, it was a bark. Hunter, staggering but relentless, threw his weight forward, driving Morrow down into the snow. The man's strength finally gave out. Jack pressed the muzzle to his former brother's chest, but he didn't pull the trigger. Instead, he grabbed the zip ties from his belt and bound Morrow's hands tight. Moments later, the distant hum of engines echoed through the valley. Headlights flashed between the trees, military police drawn by the tracker Ava had activated from the hospital. Jack lowered the weapon and dropped to his knees beside Hunter. The dog's breathing was shallow, his fur stained crimson. Jack placed a trembling hand on his side. "You did it, boy," he whispered. "You brought him down." Hunter's eyes flickered open, a faint wag of his tail brushing against Jack's knee. The sound of boots crunching snow approached. One officer shouted, "We've got him! Travis Morrow in custody!" Jack didn't answer. He stayed there, his hands buried in Hunter's fur, snow falling like ash around them. The MPs lifted Morrow away, his curses fading into the wind. Jack could only hear Hunter's slow, uneven breathing. He pressed his forehead against the dog's, whispering, "Hold on. We're going home." The sirens faded into the distance, leaving only the crackle of the frozen creek and the faint pulse beneath his palm. As dawn crept over the ridge, the first light hit the snow, painting it the color of fire. In that light, Jack could almost believe the world might forgive what it had taken. Hunter blinked once, as if understanding, then closed his eyes. The silence that followed was not empty, it was full of everything that had been earned. The courtroom at Fort Garland was austere, built of stone and silence. Outside, winter still ruled the mountains, but inside the air was heavy with the weight of unfinished wars. Rows of uniforms lined the benches, medals glinting under pale light. Reporters waited behind the glass partition pens poised like bayonets. At the center table sat Travis Morrow, his wrists cuffed, his once defiant posture dulled by exhaustion. Across the aisle sat Jack Carter in dress blues, his hands clasped loosely before him. Between them stretched not just years of service, but everything that had gone wrong when duty became survival. The judge, a silver-haired colonel with a voice that carried like wind through the barracks, adjusted his glasses. "This court convenes under Article 32 to determine charges of abduction, assault, and endangerment, as well as conduct unbecoming a Marine." His tone was formal, but his eyes betrayed fatigue. Too many soldiers had come through these walls carrying ghosts the law couldn't always measure. The defense attorney, a civilian named Harper, rose first. She was calm, deliberate, her tone softened by empathy. "Your Honor," she began, "my client is a veteran who served 3 tours in the Middle East. The man you see before you is not the same Marine who once stood shoulder to shoulder with Sergeant Carter. Medical evaluations confirm severe post-traumatic stress disorder, night terrors, paranoia, and dissociation. This is not a case of malice, but of a wounded mind lost in its own war." There was a murmur in the room. Harper continued. "Records show that Sergeant Carter once pulled Corporal Morrow from a collapsed outpost under fire. Without him, my client would not be alive. That bond one forged in battle cannot be dismissed even now." She glanced toward Jack, her gaze both pleading and respectful. "We ask this court to consider not vengeance but understanding." When she sat down, the prosecutor stood crisp and certain. "PTSD does not excuse kidnapping 2 children nor firing on a fellow Marine. Compassion cannot replace accountability." His words sliced through the air clean and sharp. Jack listened, his jaw tight but his eyes distant. He wasn't here to defend or condemn. He was here because there was no one else left who could tell the truth. After hours of testimonies and photographs, maps, medical reports, radio logs, the colonel finally looked toward him. "Sergeant Carter," he said, "you were the one who discovered the evidence and subdued the defendant. You've also been named in his service record as having saved his life during active combat. The court requests your statement." Jack stood slowly. The creak of his chair echoed in the quiet. Every gaze turned toward him. He approached the stand, the sound of his polished boots deliberate against the floor. Taking his oath, he looked not at the judge but at Morrow. The man's eyes flickered briefly, a mixture of fear, guilt, and something else memory. "Sergeant," the judge prompted. "In your own words." Jack drew a breath. "I served with Travis Morrow in Al-Fallujah." He began, his voice low but steady. "We were young. We thought we could outrun death if we just moved fast enough. One night our position got hit. The roof came down and Morrow was pinned. I pulled him out. He lived. 3 others didn't." He paused, his eyes unfocused, lost for a second in the echo of gunfire that wasn't really there. "After that, I thought saving a man meant he'd stay saved. Turns out that's not how it works." He shifted his stance, glancing briefly toward the jury. "What he did can't be undone. 2 children nearly died. I don't stand here asking you to forget that. But I also know what it's like to come home with pieces of yourself missing. The war doesn't end just because someone stamps your papers. Some men bring the battlefield back with them." He turned toward Morrow fully now. "I don't forgive what you did, but I can't hate the man who used to stand next to me either. There are people who fall and all they need just once is for someone to help them stand again." The words hung in the air, soft but immovable. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to dim. The judge leaned back slowly, his eyes unreadable. Harper blinked rapidly, setting her pen down. One of the younger MPs near the door shifted his weight, swallowing hard. The room, full of uniformed stoicism, felt suddenly human. Morrow's lips trembled, his voice breaking as he whispered, "You should have left me there." Jack shook his head. "That's not who we are." When the judge finally spoke, his tone carried something gentler than authority. "This court recognizes both the crime and the service rendered. Travis Morrow will be remanded to the Military Correctional Facility for treatment and confinement under the Veterans Rehabilitation Act. Sergeant Carter's testimony will be entered into record as mitigating." He paused. "This judgment is not mercy, it is a chance." The gavel struck once, echoing like a heartbeat against stone. The trial was over. As the MPs escorted Morrow away, he looked back once. Their eyes met a silent truce that didn't erase the past, but acknowledged its weight. Jack remained still until the doors closed, then exhaled slowly, as if releasing years he hadn't realized he was still carrying. Outside the courthouse, snow began to fall again, soft and slow, the kind that doesn't sting. Evelyn and the girls waited by the steps, bundled in coats too big for them. Leia waved shyly, and Rosie's laugh carried across the cold air like a bell. Jack smiled for the first time in months. He reached down to scratch Hunter's head, the dog's fur now grown over the old scar. "Let's go home, boy," he said. Hunter barked, once tail wagging against the snow. For the first time, the sound didn't echo loss, it sounded like peace. Spring crept back into Aspen Ridge quietly, as if afraid to disturb the peace that winter had left behind. The mountains shed their snow in slow tears, and the frozen creeks whispered again beneath the thaw. Outside the Carter cabin, the air smelled of pine and damp earth. Jack leaned against the porch rail, watching as Leia knelt beside a small patch of soil she had cleared near the steps. Her gloves were too big for her hands, but she worked carefully, pressing the roots of a small pine sapling into the earth. "He'll like this spot," she said softly. "He can see the whole valley from here." Hunter lay nearby, a thick blanket draped over his back. His side bore a long scar, the fur still growing in around it, but his eyes were bright again. Rosie sat next to him, patting his paw gently as if reassuring him that the world was safe now. Evelyn stood behind them, arms folded, face lit by a peace she hadn't known in years. "Looks like you've got help," she said to Jack. He smiled faintly. "They're better gardeners than Marines." The line made Leia giggle, a sound as pure as the wind moving through thawed branches. Jack walked over, kneeling beside the girls. He helped Leia tamp down the soil, then brushed his hands clean on his jeans. You know, he said, looking at the sapling, when it grows tall, it'll give shade to anyone who needs a place to rest. Leia nodded seriously. Then it's perfect for him. She glanced toward Hunter, who tilted his head-tail, thumping softly. It's his tree. The weeks that followed moved gently, marked by the rhythm of healing instead of survival. Hunter's strength returned day by day. Each sunrise found him walking a little farther, his limp fading until it was just a memory. Jack rebuilt the old fence, Emily helped paint the porch, and Evelyn started teaching again at the small schoolhouse down the road. Aspen Ridge, once just a storm-beaten town, felt alive again. Then came the letter, an invitation sealed with the emblem of the U.S. Marine Corps. Inside, a brief note, recognition ceremony, Aspen Ridge Town Hall, 1400 hours. Beneath it, 2 names were printed in formal script, Sergeant Jack Carter and K9 Hunter. Jack stared at it for a long moment before setting it on the table. Looks like they didn't forget us, he said quietly. Evelyn smiled. They never forget the ones who stand back up. The day of the ceremony arrived bright and clear. The entire town gathered in front of the courthouse steps, flags fluttering against a deep blue sky. Children held handmade signs, and veterans stood in crisp uniforms, their medals glinting in the sun. Hunter sat obediently beside Jack, his coat shining a new collar gleaming with polished brass. Leia and Rosie stood near the front, clutching Evelyn's hands, eyes wide with pride. The mayor took the podium first, his voice carrying across the square. Today we honor courage not just on the battlefield, but here at home. We honor those who stand between darkness and light and those who remind us what loyalty truly means. When Jack's name was called, the crowd rose. He stepped forward, shoulders straight, heart heavy with quiet humility. The Marine officer pinned the service cross to his chest, then turned to Hunter, and for extraordinary bravery in service, the K9 Valor Medal. The applause swelled as the officer bent down, affixing the small medal to Hunter's collar. The dog blinked, then barked once, a sound that made everyone laugh through their tears. Jack knelt beside him, resting a hand on his neck. You earned that, partner. As the noise faded, Jack looked down at the medal on his chest, its gold edges catching the afternoon sun. Then slowly he unpinned it. The crowd hushed. Jack stood, turning toward the small pine tree that had been planted weeks earlier near the edge of the square Leia's tree. He walked over the sound of his boots soft against the grass and hung the medal from one of its young branches. It swung gently in the breeze, flashes of light scattering across the ground. He turned back toward the crowd, his voice calm but full. He's not just a dog, he said, looking at Hunter. He's a Marine, and Marines don't leave each other behind. The words settled over the square like sunlight after rain. Leia's eyes filled as she ran to Hunter, throwing her arms around his neck. You're my hero, she whispered. The dog's tail brushed her side, his breath warm against her cheek. Rosie clapped her hands, laughing, and even the mayor had to look away for a moment, blinking hard. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of pine and spring rain. The small tree bent slightly, its new needles catching the light. Hunter lifted his head toward it, barking once sharp and proud, as if answering some invisible roll call. Jack smiled, his eyes glistening. That's right, he murmured. We made it home. As the crowd dispersed, music rose, a simple guitar, the kind townspeople played when words weren't enough. The medals shimmered in the fading sun, one on Hunter's chest, one on the tree that now belonged to them both. Evelyn took Jack's hand. You gave him back his world, she said softly. Jack shook his head. He gave it back to all of us. When evening came, the last light stretched across the valley, touching the pine, the porch, and the faces of the 3 who had survived the storm. The tree swayed gently in the wind, whispering promises only they could hear. In its shadow, Hunter rested his head on Jack's boot. eyes half-closed, content. The storm was over. The mountain had forgiven. And Aspen Ridge, once a place of loss, now held the quiet glory of lives rebuilt. And that's how a storm that nearly claimed 3 lives ended up restoring faith, loyalty, and love in the heart of Aspen Ridge. What part of this story moved you the most the moment the Marine found the girls, or when Hunter received his Medal of Honor? I'd love to hear your thoughts below. Tell us where you're watching from, and if you believe every act of courage deserves to be remembered, hit like, share this video, and subscribe for more true stories of hope, sacrifice, and second chances.